Well, good evening everybody and welcome to what is the last Ordinary Council meeting of this term of Council. And it is a pleasure to see all the councillors in the chamber through rearrangement of furniture and offices, that we are adhering to all the COVID regulations, but it is great that everybody has been able to assemble here tonight in this room for the very last of our meetings for this term of Council. So thank you everybody for making that effort. So welcome to East Gippsland Shire Council's Ordinary Council meeting of 6 October 2020. You will be aware that the election period commenced on the 22nd of September 2020 and will conclude on the 24th of October 2020 at 6 p.m. I would like to remind all councillors and council officers that tonight's council meeting falls within the election period. Accordingly, the provisions of council's election period policy will apply. These provisions are intended to assist councillors and council officers to continue to conduct ordinary matters of administration that need to be addressed in the lead up to an election, while maintaining public confidence in an unbiased election process. East Gippsland Shire Council is committed to the principle of fair and democratic elections and has adopted the practices detailed within this election period policy to guide the conduct of councillors and council officers throughout the election process. Effective from the 1st of May 2020, amendments to the Local Government Act 2020 allows virtual council meetings to ensure decision making can continue during the coronavirus pandemic. The council meeting must be live streamed. East Gippsland Shire will live stream, record and publish its meeting via webcasting to enhance the accessibility of the meetings to the broader East Gippsland community. These recordings are archived and available for viewing by the public or used for publicity or information purposes. Pre-recorded videos for public questions and requests to speak on an agenda item submitted in the correct form prior to the council meeting will be played at the appropriate time during the meeting and included in the recording of the meeting. No other person has the right to record council meetings unless approval has been granted by the Chair. As per the Minister's Good Practice Guideline issued by the Minister for Local Government on the 29th of April 2020, the intention is to ensure the normal, ordinary business of Council can continue through the use of electronic communication. Now, as everybody is present here this evening, there is no need to talk to the screen here, because that part of the procedure was to acknowledge that you could hear and see and you're in a secure place. So that part of the proceedings is not required tonight, as everybody is present. So I thank you for that. So that then leads me to say, on behalf of Council, I would like to acknowledge the Gunai Kurnai people, the traditional owners of the land on which we are gathered, and pay our respects to their elders, both past and present. So at item 1.2, I would ask the CEO, as I am aware that there will be no apologies.
Correct, there are no apologies, Mr Mayor.
Procedural. So at 1.3, do we have any declarations of conflict of interest?
None have been provided, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Now, 1.4 is a confirmation of the minutes, that the minutes of the Ordinary Council meeting of 15th of September 2020 be confirmed. So I have Councillor Peltz and seconded by Councillor Reeves. Thank you. So, with that, all those in favour? Thank you, councillors. That is unanimous. Now at 1.5, that's our statutory council meeting. It's Tuesday the 17th of November 2020 to be held at the Corporate Centre at 273 Main Street, Pensdale, commencing at 6 p.m. Ordinary council meeting on Tuesday the 24th of November 2020 to be held at the Corporate Centre at 273 Main Street, Pensdale, also commencing at 6 p.m. This is procedural, but at 1.6 we have requests for leave of absence.
None have been received, Mr Mayor.
I would have thought not. A long absence. At 1.7, do we have any requests to speak about your community program?
There are no requests, Mr.
Project.
Mayor.
Thank you. And at 1.8, we have our public question time.
And there are no public questions.
Thank you. 1.9.1. This is a record of the assemblies of councillors. So, thank you. So, Councillor O'Connell has moved this and Councillor Roberts has seconded it. Obviously, everybody would have been have read this, so therefore I would ask all those in favour. That is unanimous. Thank you. One 1.10 is petitions, of which there are nil. Item 2, notices of motion and or rescission.
None have been received, Mr. Mayor.
And item 3 is deferred business.
And there is no deferred business.
Thank you. Item 4 is councillor and delegate reports. So we can move into that. All right, well, let's break with tradition of the last few meetings and we'll go in an anti-clockwise direction. So, Councillor Peltz, would you like to give your report, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Rural Councils is still actively meeting over the Skype network and our next meeting is scheduled for Friday. So we have what is considered to be our important Rural Council structural plan to adopt and make sure that gets through. It's been a much awaited document, but that will be the main thing that we'll be looking at on Friday. Least to say there's been much activity behind the scenes with our Chair Marianne Brown from Warrnambool, who has been actively meeting or Skyping into the ministers each week and chatting behind the scenes in regards to the cross-border issues that we've had and some of the some of the advocating for rural councils to have lesser restrictions than what the Melbourne urban councils are having. So I think they've been really effective in that area and it's been a pleasure to be actively participating. Many of the words that are actually being announced over the networks are actually words that I've actually contributed. So I think it's been a really great position for us to be part of, and I really hope that the next council sees it to be as rewarding as what I actually have, and I think it's been a benefit specifically to this council to have a direct network in, considering we're a cross-border council, we're the most furthest east council, and I believe it's been really of benefit to us, or I feel like I've really contributed with regards to rural everyday life. So with that stated, we've had some really great plans that have been useful throughout our time on rural councils that we still use today, with references to, the rural living and the statistics that we've been able to put out. And the last thing that they've been advocating for is how important the FAGS grants actually are to rural councils and what a benefit they are and how essential they are to keep going. So with that stated, I really think that they've been a really good backup to our community and that it's been of benefit to have an advocate on. So, and also in the seat space, which is another passion of mine, we are still actively working behind the scenes, particularly in regards to cross-border issues. And a lot of the, I just heard this week from Darren Chester's announcements that the last 12 kilometres of the Bonang Highway are being funded, and I actually think that's just the best news because that has always been a sore spot for our community, and I have to say I'm just delighted to be signing off with that, knowing that that's going to be addressed, and I feel like my mission is complete. So thank you everyone, and it's been a complete, absolute pleasure for me to be able to represent you at this level. So I thank you all for the support and the time, and all the best.
Thank you, Councillor Peltz, and thank you for your contribution. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Being this is our last council meeting, I wanted to say a couple of brief words. I'll keep it short, but I really wanted to acknowledge the councillors the officers, advocacy groups and community members that have supported me over the last few years. My time on council has been incredibly challenging, but also incredibly rewarding. However, not in many of the ways that I would have initially expected. Some of the hardest decisions and situations that I've been in my life have been around this table. While I've been extremely tested at times, I respect the work that the other councillors have contributed. I'm incredibly grateful to have been given the opportunity to participate in local government and represent my peers. I feel I'm confident that I can look back at my time on council and comfortably say that I stuck to my principles and stood up for what I believed in, even if at times I may not have shared the views of others. Councillors, I believe, have a sole responsibility to represent their community, and sometimes that involves asking difficult questions. I would encourage that the new council remain sure, strong, and to constantly review and reassess all processes to ensure that they ensure the best outcome for East Gippsland. I would wish them all the very best in the next council term, and I look forward to watching from the sidelines. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Thank you very much. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, for the opportunity to speak. Like my predecessor, I'll keep my words very brief this evening. I'll continue working on the Australian Coastal Council's workshops and advocacy for coastal asset management and other challenges of a changing climate. I've also continued working with the Gippsland Regional Waste Management Forum and board in relation to the introduction of new waste management procedures and practices that will be introduced by the state government later in the year and over the next 18 months. That's been quite challenging over the last 2 or 3 weeks in terms and commitment to a most important subject. This is the conclusion of this council, and I'd like to thank everyone seated here tonight for the contribution to our community and to the fellowship and application to good governance across the board in East Gippsland. I'd also like to thank the officers under the charge of our new CEO, Anthony, and I wish him the very best for the future. I also would like to thank the general public who have supported our council at different times. We all at times may have different opinions on different things, but along the way the importance of local grassroots democracy comes to the fore. As such, I felt that it was an honour to represent people and to be part of our democratic process, and I wish everyone seated at this chambers bench tonight the very best for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Thank you very much. Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I agree with all those sentiments already expressed, and just like to mention one little thing. I opened my rate tax notice the other day and I found I was $11.74 in front, and that was the total credit. I've never heard of that ever happening anywhere at any time. I thought to myself, well, I've got enough change here to buy a couple of beers and there's a little bit left over. So that was a pleasant surprise. And thank you everybody for everything you've done for us. And you too, Mr Mayor, in particular. Thank you for your effort you put in the trying time. Thank you.
Good, thank you, Councillor Buckley. Councillor Reeves.
Thanks, Mayor. Woman-Inji, good evening and welcome everyone. Councillors, officers and community members who may be viewing tonight, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm proud of the work this council has undertaken and achieved in this last 4 years, and really after a shaky start, we should celebrate the achievements of this group and this organisation. CEO, I believe there is a comprehensive end-of-term report that will be available to the public, and I do urge the public to have a look at that and to realise the hard work that's been undertaken over the last 4 years. Councillors, this council engaged our current CEO, Anthony, and I want to thank you, Anthony, for your work and that of your team and your senior staff and the whole staff in the organisation. You and they have led a revival that continues in this organisation, and irrespective of the future, I urge you to keep your foot on the accelerator. Some of the highlights, I think, and there are many, but I'm just going to say a couple of them. I think the live streaming of these meetings has been a real highlight, and it's really brought democracy into the lounge rooms and homes and desktops of so many people. I think taking these meetings to the community have been another fantastic highlight. I really valued that aspect of our governance and engagement, and we are willing to accept the costs. No, it's not a cost, it's an investment associated with this great piece of democracy, and I think it's been positively received. I'm not going to list all the achievements, but I do note the Aboriginal traineeship program I think was fantastic. Some waste strategies, investment in streetscapes has been amazing, and recently we battled with drought, black summer fires, COVID-19 impacts, terrible, awful events in these times, and none of this is easy, and it takes collaboration and constant work. Councillors, I want to thank you for your work and collaboration around this table. We've not always agreed on individual issues, but we've all worked towards better outcomes for our community as a result of this diversity and our contribution. I want to wish you well, and on behalf of the community, thank you for your contribution to public life. It's hard work. And I feel genuinely that I've made friendships and connections around this table that make me a better person as a result. So thank you. Councillor Buckley, I want to acknowledge your 28 years of public life and congratulate you and thank you for that contribution to the community of East Gippsland. 28 years. 29? Well, I think we celebrated 25 3 years ago, so I just added on 3 to 25, but we'll call it 29, and it's a long time, so and it's noted, and I acknowledge that. Councillors, I want to acknowledge the 3 mayors from our term, and thank you for your dedicated work and to ably represent the views of council in many local, regional, state and national forums. Now, I've said this before, but there's a reason for the handsome portrait that the Shire takes of you, and they're hanging outside in the foyer, councillors. There's a reason they take that photo, because you're supposed to give it to your family, because as mayor, that's all they'll see of you for the next 12 months. And for the mayors who have been around this table, it's quite true, isn't it? It's a really demanding role. To our support staff behind the scenes here who tirelessly help us as councillors in our regular ICT and other ineptitudes, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And they say, or maybe I say, behind every successful councillor is an astounded councillor support team. They're astounded. To our community watching tonight, thank you for giving me the opportunity to be your representative here in this chamber with this group of people, and for giving me the opportunity in the many privileged roles I've been humbled to accept. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Councillor Rotino.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and thanks other councillors for their words. I'd like to also acknowledge the other mayors. I was the first in this council term, followed by Councillor Natalie O'Connell and followed by yourself, Mayor White. And I think it's worth just highlighting a couple of things, and there is an official report. It's been a privilege to serve the people of East Gippsland for the past 4 years, and even though I'm not continuing beyond this current term, my passion and advocacy for everything that is great about the region will continue. I leave this place knowing that there is a long-term strategic vision. Through respectful advocacy, this group's ensured decision makers know where East Gippsland is. And we need that because we need the infrastructure investment. And we need to get our fair share out of all the tiers of government. And our ABS CFA index for disadvantaged demands that state and federal governments pay more attention to this region. We've also been able to work with our agency partners and create a health and wellbeing plan for the Shire. We've worked through the CEO, and I thank former CEO, but also Mr Basford here, who has developed and introduced a corporate process that is creating and maintaining a strong customer-centric organisation. So I thank you, Anthony, and your staff. In 2016, we drove a strategy, this council drove a strategy to take these meetings outside of this corporate centre and out to our communities. And I think we sometimes don't stop and take a deep breath and think about the good things like that we've actually done that have had more, there's more benefit to that one simple step than we probably acknowledge ourselves. We also continued that form of engagement by going out to the Bem River and sorting out the boat ramp issue there that had been an issue for a while. We sat down and we found some middle ground. We also, this Shire, supported Tertiary Study Hub, an asset for this region that will see benefits for our young people and people transitioning roles for a long time to come. We worked with that tertiary sector to create opportunities that can retain our young people and provide training opportunities for our key sector regional employers. The objective at the end of the day was to ensure that local East Gippsland people have the best opportunity to get a local job. Through the regional economic development, we've made tourism a key priority. We've advocated for significant experiential tourism assets. And Jeremy Thorpe, the economist from PwC, has stated many times experiential tourism keeps growing at double-digit growth. And for a region like East Gippsland, that's a significant opportunity and will be, especially post-COVID, where we get more regional tourism. And a fine example of that advocacy was in the significant grant securing for the Omeo mountain bike project. Some other key things through our advocacy we tabled with the CEO was to ensure that we got a fair share from some of the primary industry that was transitioning, and we asked the government for some transitioning packages around the fishing licences, the commercial buyout. We also recently this year took a really strong message to the government around roads of strategic importance. And I think that was a really strategic thing to do, given that our main Princes Highway was closed for close to a month on the Black Summer bushfires. Finally, Mr Mayor, I did attend the East Gippsland Marketing Plan launch for 2020-2021, and it was a great virtual event where dinner was provided by Northern Ground just down the road. But one of the things that I wanted to mention was the keynote speaker was Pete Williams, and Pete Williams just felt compelled to help East Gippsland when the summer bushfires came through, having spent a lot of time in 2009 helping the communities up there recover. So Pete's recognised as a thought leader practitioner in innovation. He started work with internet technology in 93 and 96 and founded an e-business consulting group with Deloitte Australia. Since that time, Pete has been the CEO of Eclipse Group, Deloitte subsidiary, and then founded Deloitte Digital. He's also the chairman of Deloitte Innovation Council and Chief Edge Officer. He's recently named one of Australia's top digital influencers and adjunct professor at RMIT. We've been lucky in East Gippsland to have Pete, and he's been here helping us through his pro bono work with Deloitte. Pete was heavily involved with the 2009 Black Saturday disaster recovery and worked closely with the impacted communities during recovery from that horrific event. He has been working with our community recovery centres, and we are lucky to have people of the calibre of Pete assist us with his work in the various community recovery committees. He's been uplifting for those committees, and not just for the work he's done. He's just a genuine upbeat person. Pete and many others continue to show such significant support for our region and recovery, and I just want to say a heartfelt thanks to the people like that. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Rottino. Councillor O'Connell.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Well, it's hard to believe that our council term has come to an end. When I was first elected, my children were 8 months and 2 years old, and I now have a 4 and a 6-year-old, which is really hard to believe. Like the others, and they've already been mentioned, but some of the achievements that this council has realised, that I've, felt that were important to me, was the council meetings on the road to our outer-lying centres. That community engagement is as Councillor Rees said, a real investment, and the engagement we've had from that has been truly amazing, so I really hope that that continues. Obviously, the Omeo Mountain Bike Project, which has already produced significant economic stimulus to our region, the employment of our new CEO, who's no longer new, we can't say new anymore, and the organisational restructure, it has been a breath of fresh air, and you've led the organisation through a truly difficult time, and I commend you and your staff on the efforts that you have done through that period. Through that restructure, the creation of place manager positions for outlying centres like Omeo and Orbost and Mallacoota, which I know will bring more localised ownership and decision making back to these areas. And increased transparency to the council, which was reducing the council decisions meetings, council decisions made at meetings closed to the public. When we first started, I think this figure, which is on the Know Your Council website, was around 40%. When we first started, we're now at 2.67%, which is obviously testament to our processes, and other like councils are sitting at approximately 8%. So I think we do pretty well in that space. With the exception of COVID this year, I've travelled the Great Alpine Road every Tuesday, and when I was mayor, sometimes up to 5 days a week, getting home at all hours of the night. So having been able to Skype into meetings has made a huge difference. And as a large shire, the travel and the time, the distance for attending meetings in person can be a barrier for people to consider running for council. So I hope that technology like this, which has been shown through the pandemic that it is now part of the modern workplace, and we raised a notice of motion earlier this year, and we've just received the response from the Local Government Minister to say that he is undertaking further evaluation to see whether it will become a permanent feature of the Local Government Act 2020, which hopefully that happens. As the mayor last year, it was an incredibly challenging but rewarding time, and I'm proud to have represented the Shire, and also to have been the first from my area in Omeo. Obviously this year, through the drought, bushfires, and then COVID, and then personally for me, it was also probably the most devastating time in my life when I lost my mum, and then my grandfather this year. But these losses really put everything into perspective about what is important. So I'd really like to take this opportunity to thank my family, and also the councillors and the council staff who have provided support and collegiate friendship to me over the last 4 years. I'm really proud and privileged to have represented our community, and I wish all the candidates for the best for the upcoming elections. And to the voters, your vote counts, so make sure you know exactly who you're voting for, and make it count. The next 4 years are going to be critical for East Gippsland, given the year we've had. So good luck to the next council around the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Connell. Now, Councillor Toohey.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Pretty hard to follow all of that. Look, I must say, in regards to achievements that we have, as a group have made, council in the community, along with some other councillors, I believe has been one of the great things that we have done. It has added to our community's understanding of what their council does and the way they do it. And as Councillor O'Connell just said, their understanding of how council works and being able to be out there in the community is a great asset for any councillor, because talking to people is what we do, and supporting our community is what we should be doing. So I do see that as a great achievement. To the support staff, thank you. The support staff and other staff that we deal with on sometimes a day-to-day basis, having people there who care about their job, care about their community, and as it turns out, cared about what we were doing and how we were doing it, has been superb. You cannot run a good organisation without good support, and that's certainly what we've had. and from the top down. So it's been a terrific support, and I've appreciated each and every staff member that I've had interactions with. I have submitted a report, and it just disappoints me, the one on my final report, that I have had to submit a complaint to the local government directorate in regards to Councillor Ellis and the use of his car by his family. But
Colin.
all in all, after 4 years, I think it's been good. So thanks very much. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
All right. I've heard lots of stories around the table, so I've got a few words to say. I will firstly just say, you know, it was business as usual again for the month in terms of going to meetings and staying engaged. But one thing that really I felt very, well, not comfortable about, but just so happy. I was approached by the ABC program, The Drum, and appeared on that, and I've gone, wow, this is, you know, that was just something that I thought was, you know, a highlight. It was a highlight. So now I've got, you know, we have our council group, which has been great, and thank you all, and certainly all the officers. In fact, some of the people who have supported me, and over the whole 4 years, they've been given a nickname as my security blankets, because they have assisted me so much, particularly in the electronics era, something which I'm not that good at. But, you know, so I thank them very much for keeping me advised and on the straight and narrow. As Councillor Reeves said before, Councillor Buckley could be considered an institution in our region.
Oh, here we go.
Here we go. Or we say our esteemed aviator. Thank you for assisting me as Deputy Mayor, but I would like to just put it out there, this is live streamed, to say from the community, thank you so much for your many, many years of service, and your wise old mind ticking away all the time. I know you're calling it quits, but you've done such a great job, and so many people do admire you for all the work that you've done over such a long period of time. So I just say thank you so much. Now, in terms of sort of looking back, I would actually say that the people I'd like to acknowledge, as well as just our community here in East Gippsland, but our community in Australia, in fact our community around the world. It was a terrible way in January this year to actually get global recognition, because it was a terrible way to get global recognition. But out of that came some unbelievable support, actually from around the world, of people who just expressed a concern and interest for how things were going in East Gippsland and who was affected, and the monetary gifts and the goods that were received was overwhelming. And they just came from everywhere, from, you know, out of our own towns to out of our own state to out of our own country, and even calls from Canada, from England and things like this. It was overwhelming, but at the back end of all that was also all of the people who volunteered their time to help and distribute a lot of these things, because I tip my hat to our service groups in our community, our Rotaries, our Lions Club. You know, they are the salt of the earth. The things that they do for community and in many cases disadvantaged community. And then of course we've assembled the Salvos, the Red Cross, St Vincent de Paul, and many, many other organisations that have just come to help us. So I would just like to have it on the record to say a sincere and heartfelt thank you to all those people, because it was amazing. And to those people who have been affected, I really do hope that you are on the road to recovery and feeling much better, and perhaps, and more importantly, much safer And, you know, I just wish you all so much goodwill in the future. So thank you. So I guess that ends the reports, councillors' final reports. And thank you so much for that. So that moves us on now to item 5, part of item 5, which is officer reports. And this is 5.1.1, which is our Gippsland Regional Plan for 2020 to 2025. So I'd like to introduce our CEO to discuss this.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and councillors. I am seeking, my officer recommendation is to seek the endorsement for the fully revised Gippsland Regional Plan. The plan has been revised by the consultants Aerium and oversight by a leadership group that was made up by the 6 councils, Regional Development Australia, the Committee for Gippsland, Regional Development Victoria and the Gippsland Regional Partnership. The plan highlights the strengths and opportunities for Gippsland. There have been regular updates to the One Gippsland group, of which the Mayor of the day is the delegate on that group. Council has also received a briefing on this matter on the 4th of May, which was at the 2020, which was in the early stages of its development. I think it's really important to note that the plan, as the name suggests, is regionally focused. So this is about advocating for Gippsland as a whole, as a region. It doesn't prevent council from advocating for important local issues. It doesn't take away from that at all. There are 6 themes which are outlined in the plan very clearly. There was extensive consultation done, and particularly this time there was an effort made to engage with young people, Aboriginal people and marginalised groups, and there was certainly a lot of work done with the regular, I guess, agencies and organisations that would participate in this type of plan. The plan includes some measures of success where they are practical to do so. Not every action can have a clear measure of success, but where there were measures, they've been included. And it's also included some steps to success. So it's not just about a document that just talks about these aspirational items or these motherhood statements, but there are actual steps to achieve some of the things that are listed in the plan. So I recommend the plan to you for endorsement and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr CEO. Questions? Councillors?
I have a question, Mr Mayor. Mr CEO, if you may, would you actually just let us know how this report was funded for the aerial group to be able to undertake it, and just so that the community knows it was a joint effort and how much was actually spent, please?
Through you, Mr Mayor, and thank you for the question, Councillor. So each of the local government areas provided $5,000, plus there was a grant from Regional Development Victoria, and I'm sorry I don't have that at my fingertips, but essentially a matching grant to also assist in its development. So whilst for a small investment to leverage a number of other funding sources, it was a great opportunity to participate.
Councillor Reeves?
Thanks, Mayor. CEO, thanks for that introduction. And I've read the regional plan, and I remember the previous regional plan when it was first introduced, and there's perhaps a couple of differences. This has 2 additional themes compared to the previous plan, broadly, around collaborators and partners and a healthy, happy and inclusive community. I think that they're really terrific that that's been included in this broad overview. I just wanted to note that, but my question is, on reflection and in the work on this new plan, was there a discussion about the implementation of the previous plan and the success or otherwise, and how that might give us an indication of where we're going to go and the success of this new plan?
Through you, Mr Mayor, thank you for the question, Councillor Reeves. So there certainly was, and there is a link in the report to the existing plan. There were regular reports to the Gippsland Local Government Network, which is now called One Gippsland, on the success of the implementation of that plan. Much of the previous plan was around specific projects, so it was fairly infrastructure based. So I think there was an interim report done that actually demonstrated where some of the items had been delivered on that plan. So there was a review of that plan, and part of that process looked at, that's why the additional pillars were added in, because it was felt that it needed to do more than just deliver infrastructure, because obviously people are important in that process. So that's why the collaboration and the healthy communities was part of the inclusions as well.
And thanks, Mayor, and thank you for that response, CEO. And I do note in this particular report, as you've mentioned, the steps to success. So I think that's really a key difference in this report. So yeah, it's a really valuable piece of work for us.
Any more questions? All right, thank you. So it's moved Councillor Rotino, seconded Councillor Reeves. So Councillor Rotino, would you wish to speak?
I'd just like to thank the CEO for his work in relation to this update of this plan. I think it's really important, the bit that Councillor Reeves spoke about, the steps to success. I heard it recently described when we were doing some work with the Boston Consulting Group as stage, iteration, steps to success. And those incremental steps are so important for people to feel like things are progressing. And sometimes, and they're doing it in the corporate world, that the objective is so high that they feel like they're never going to get there, and a lot of those plans fail. So even the big consulting firms are now recommending this is the correct pathway, steps to success. So, and the inclusion of those other groups now, I think it's really important to have that inclusivity, to have a complete strategy for the whole of Gippsland. And then the sub-regions like East Gippsland, we should be able to feed off what's happening. So thank you.
Good. Councillor Reeves?
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Rotino. My only additional comments are to reiterate the organic feature of this particular plan, and that is about people, and I think that's a really key focus and change, and I congratulate One Gippsland for their work on that. Thank you, CEO. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Councillor Peltz?
Thanks very much. I'd just like to contribute to the discussion and just point out a couple of areas that I see a difference in this this document compared with the previous one. And I just would like to say the agricultural, forestry and fishing industry was actually a whole lot higher up the list, with a larger percentage than healthcare and construction. So I'm noticing a change in what is actually now starting to show in the figures, and I dare say into the future, now that we'll be looking at the demise of the rest of the timber industry, that will actually become further down the list. And just curious to point that out to the community, that this is still an ongoing issue, and it is a major concern for the economy of the whole of the Gippsland region. And I would hate to see it disappear completely. I would much prefer to see value-added processing to, you know, make something better of something that people are just presuming is acceptable, but it's actually not. So I just wanted to make that comment in regards to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peltz. Anybody else wish to speak for or against? All right. Thank you, Councillor. So we'll put this to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. That is unanimous. 5.2.1, which is East Gippsland Shire Council Audit and Risk Committee Performance Review for 2019-20. So I'd introduce Mr Canizzaro to speak, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, before you is a report on the Audit and Risk Committee Annual Performance Review for East Gippsland Shire Council, ended 30th of June 2020. Annually, the Audit Risk Committee performs an assessment of the way in which they have performed throughout the year, and then provides a report to Council. The report or the survey was completed by members of the Audit and Risk Committee, including councillors that do not sit on the committee and also senior officers. The results of the survey were assessed by the committee, and then the chairperson of the Audit and Risk Committee reported the review and the outcomes to a joint meeting with councillors in September 2020. The content of the questionnaire was quite detailed and very comprehensive in terms of trying to understand the Audit and Risk Committee's strengths and weaknesses over the last 12 months, understand the conduct of and function of their duties, and the charter and the skill mix of and the makeup of the Audit and Risk Committee. As I said, the results were assessed and presented to a joint council meet. The positive news out of all that is that the committee felt that they had met the objectives as outlined in the Audit and Risk Committee Charter for 2019/20. Some of the suggested improvements that came out of the committee assessment was around potentially introducing pre-meeting questions that would be submitted to management so that management were able to provide some comprehensive responses to their questions. So it would improve the timeliness of the Audit and Risk Committee meeting, and also reviewing and improving the onboarding of new committee members. As you know, there were a couple of new committee members introduced in this term, and the committee felt that we need to provide better and perhaps more robust induction to the way we do things at East Gippsland Shire Council and the Audit Risk Committee, and also really a very positive opportunity to provide positive feedback to the authors of information that is provided to the Audit Risk Committee. So that's the background and summary of the report. So the report's presented to Council to note the report. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillors, do you have questions? Okay. Excuse me. All right, so moved by Councillor Rotino and seconded by Councillor O'Connell. Did you wish to speak?
Just quickly, Mr Mayor, I'd like to acknowledge the current chair and the previous chair and the independent members of the Audit and Risk Committee for the work that they provide and give us that independent oversight and play that important role for East Gippsland Shire Council. Thank you.
Councillor O'Connell, okay. Anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Reeves.
If I can briefly, I'd also reiterate those comments from Councillor Rotino about our members of the Audit and Risk Committee and thank them for their work over the last years, and also just the recommendations. I think in particular that positive feedback recommendation is consistent with the acknowledgement of work that would be helpful for the organisational culture we've seen in staff opinion surveys. So it's good to hear that message coming through from multiple sources, and that'll be a positive impact on the whole organisation.
Councillor Peltz.
Yes, if I may, I'd like to reiterate my colleagues' comments and also just add I'd like to thank the staff also for getting it all compliant and putting it in order. It's been a really hard, challenging year, and particularly for Liz and her team, meeting the obligations and having to juggle figures left, right and centre, and to Anthony and everyone for their contribution in regards to making sure that our figures are respectful for this term of council to be leaving with. I'd also like to say I did sit in on the last audit committee meeting, and over the years, the 12 years that I've been a member on and off, it was my pleasure to be able to thank the independent contributors, the people that sit in and help with the delegates that actually sit in, and their time is valuable and their skills is also valuable to the councillors. You know, they're very well respected for their contribution and their opinions, and I'd just like to thank them very much, and to the staff as well. Thank you. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. So, no other people wish to speak, so we'll put this to the vote, please, councillors. All those in favour? Thank you. It's passed unanimously also. So 5.2.2 is the our annual report for 2019-2020. Also hand over to Mr Canizzaro. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Also online we have Rebecca Aston and Jamie Lynch for any technical questions that you may wish to pose. Councillors, before you is the annual report 2019/20 as provided in attachment 1, and we are seeking your endorsement of the report as forwarded to the Minister for Local Government on 30th of September 2020. And that's a process that is followed. That the report is presented to the Minister for Local Government prior to it coming to Council for formal adoption. I take the report as read, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Councillors, any questions? Okay, thank you. Councillor Reeves has moved it and Councillor Ellis has seconded this. So you must wish to speak.
Thanks, Mayor and councillors. First of all, we understand this is a compliance document, and as such, it has to go to the Minister. But councillors, it's so much more than a compliance document, isn't it? And when you read this 500-page annual report, it is a snapshot of a most extraordinary year. It really is. And I think I'm sort of proud to be here sitting with that report and having to read through it and understand the complexity that we as an organisation and as a community have had to deal with, and it has been documented in such an accessible way. And I'm proud that in maybe 100 years' time, it will be, as I said, not just a compliance document, but a historical document that will tell the story of the travails and successes and overcoming adversity of our community and our organisation in the year 2019-2020. So I congratulate the staff who have put together a really accessible, as I said, and readable and engaging document that should sit on the shelves and be a reference document for the future as well. And CEO, thank you for giving the staff that imprimatur to be creative and providing that document.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Councillor Ellis.
Well, Mr Mayor, for the convenience of this evening, I just want to corroborate Councillor Reeves' words, because they tell exactly what this report is. It's a story of the past year. I would look forward to seeing the next council report on 2020-21. I think that's going to make even more interesting reading. I'd also like to congratulate the authors of the plan in terms of its layout and the way that it's a little bit more with its readability. Council plans over the years have often been laborious to go through and difficult to access information. Right now, we're starting to get to a document that seems to be more user-friendly. And as Mark said, perhaps in 100 years' time, a researcher might be sitting back there to see what we went through, like people are doing now, with looking back onto the Spanish flu and other issues 100 years back to see how communities cope with the challenges of an epidemic. So I, again, can thank Councillor Reeves for his comments and for all those council officers that put this report together, and I recommend it to council to adopt. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Anyone else wish to speak? Good. Councillor Rotino.
Mr Mayor, you quite often hear these days about the triple bottom line. And here we have a really strong report that on any measure, whether it's social, environmental or financial, it ticks all the boxes and it sets this organisation up for a really healthy future. And that's really important given all the challenges that we know about that are you know, around the corner. We don't know. Hopefully there's no more black swans flying around. But I'd really like to acknowledge all the departments of the organisation that feed into the social, environmental and financial, but in particular the financial management of the business. This business is really, really healthy on any measure, any benchmark. I've heard some interesting comments around rates and our finances lately, but I won't go there. But this organisation is in really strong financial position, and that's a really important point to make. And you can look on any measure, any of the Know Your Council benchmarks, and I acknowledge the strong leadership, Mr CEO. Thank you on this report.
Councillor Peltz. Thanks, Councillor Rotino.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I would like to concur with my council colleagues in regards to this document and just reiterate Councillor Rotino's comments about leaving this council in a very strong financial position. And one of the things that was brought up at Rural Council is that the Minister for Local Government will be absolutely looking at viable rural councils and the sustainability of a council, and to know and leave this council in the position it's in, and being knowing that we have left it in a very positive position. I'm pleased to be saying that you know, the officers have done extraordinary work, and that we are actually looking positive for the future, and knowing that we won't be one of these councils that the Minister will be honing in on to perform better. And I'd also like to say well done to the CEO and to his staff in regards to bringing up our position on the Know Your Council website, and we're ticking more boxes now than what we were definitely ticking probably 4 years ago, and now 8 years ago. So I'd like to congratulate the staff also on the, you know, the great progression that's happening in that space. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peltz. Anyone else wish to speak before we go to the vote? Okay, thank you. So, councillors, I'd ask all those in favour of this this motion to raise their hands. It's Councillor Ellis. Did you? Good. Thank you. I missed that. So that's also unanimous. Thank you, councillors. That leads us to item 5.2.3, which is instrument of delegation, council to council staff. Also, I'll pass to Mr Cannizzaro again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, before you is a report with respect to seeking council's approval for the instrument of delegation from council to council staff, as well as the appointment of, or the instrument of appointment and authorisation certificates as well. So there are two distinct recommendations before you. The instruments of delegation allow officers to perform their functions and duties in accordance with their position. And as I said, the report is recommending two distinct recommendations. And I take it the report has been read, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And we also have online Patricia Clive, our Governance and Compliance Coordinator, who can field any of the technical questions if need be.
Thank you, Mr Cannizzaro. So, councillors, do you have questions in relation to this item? You got a question? Yeah, go with the question first, please.
I have, just for the community's sake, behind the scenes I've been questioning a fair bit about this document because I wasn't comfortable with some of the terminologies in it, in particular some of the wording that was used, and I felt that it was probably over worded. I felt that many of the items in this were open to interpretation, and I have been chatting with the officers behind the scene with regards to some of the things in particular, with the option of having some kind of thought in place. But if you may be able to put to rest some of my concerns, which were about the way this document was put together, and in particular there was some delegating wording that actually said, if I may look at my phone now, because I had the photos on this so that I could read it out at the time. Yeah, the word power. In the column, it actually stated functions, power functions and item delegated, and I felt that some of the officers may have taken it literally, that it should have actually been an alternative word. And so I asked Mr Cannizzaro if he might explain some of our conversation that we had, just to reiterate for the community that we have discussed it, and that we sort of have worked forward through the questioning, but it actually went for probably about an hour and a half, or 45 minutes plus 45 minutes in length with regards to the concerns.
Sure. Thank you for the question, Councillor Pels, and through you, Mr Mayor. So we did discuss, as you say, the terminology power function or item delegated, and we did hone in on the words power, I think, or the word power, to try and explain the way we've developed the entire suite of delegations. We have, first and foremost, what before you in terms of the instrument of delegation is an updated version of the instrument of delegation that has already been approved. So this is an update with respect to administrative changes. So this delegation has been in place for several years, and the format hasn't changed. So in terms of the term power or duty or function or item, the delegations are drawn from the pieces of legislation, and the legislation will particularly point to a power or a duty or an act, and therefore that is then transposed, if you like, into this delegation, and the report is seeking council to delegate those powers, duties or functions so that council officers can carry out their work with respect to providing service or services to the community. And also the tool that we use is a common tool that we source from a law firm, and that law firm also provides that tool to many councils. I can't give you the exact number, but several councils within Victoria. So it's consistent across the local government Victoria area, and I can have comfort in knowing that, and my research with other councils is that we are consistent with respect to the provisions within that instrument of delegation. And this report is seeking an update to the existing delegation for administrative changes such as job titles or position titles, and any new positions that have come into play, so we can then confer that delegation to those position holders so they can carry out their functions.
Any other questions from councillors? All right, so we have Councillor Toohey has moved it, Councillor Rotino has seconded this, so would you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And I'd just like to say thank you to Councillor Peltz in regards to asking those questions, because we did have probably an hour and a half conversation in regards to the issues that you brought to the table. And and it reminds me of the very reason why we're here, and that is to ensure that moving forward that we have the best possible policies and procedures in place in order to get the best outcome for our community. So I thank you for those questions, and I'm fully in support of this recommendation. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Rotino, do you wish to say a few words?
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. Again, I concur. It's always good to ask questions.
Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm speaking in favour of the motion, but would like to commend Councillor Peltz, because the issue of delegations for any elected body is critical to have an understanding of the delegations. The authorities delegated, where the power within a local council lies, and that applies both to in a financial sense as well as in an authoritative sense in terms of the implementation of different regulations. So it is wise for good councils to always question and review the delegations that are put forward. So I commend the recommendation before council and thank Councillor Peltz.
Councillor Buckley.
I take it this is my opportunity to speak against the recommendation, Mr Mayor?
Yes, absolutely. That's your right.
Thank you. When I joined this game, started this game back in the early 80s, our mayors and presidents and the councillors didn't sort of use the word power to delegate. We did that ourselves. Like, we decided what we would do, and we didn't ask the administration to do our work for us like that. We'd discuss it around ourselves and decide what we're going to do. Well, that has all faded away. Over the years, the power has drifted from the actual council group into the administrators. This is no reflection on you in any way, Mr CEO, or anybody else in this room. And I suppose that's just how it's got to be. That's part of the evolutionary process, that's how things evolve. But it just worries me a little bit, the erosion of power that's gone from the elected members to the appointed administrators. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Good, thank you, Councillor Buckley. So, Councillor Reeves, you wish to speak?
I'll speak in favour. I note Councillor Buckley's comments and respect them. And I do take Councillor Peltz's inquiries and concerns to heart as well. I think that often these documents are written in a necessary legalese that is sometimes hard to follow. And just even the term power, duties and functions are quite confusing often to understand what they do mean. Now, the notion of power often means empowerment, which means disempowering somebody else. So it's good to question that terminology and to get that reassurance around this instrument of delegation that we're moving tonight, that it is actually solidly based. So thank you, councillors, for that inquiry and seeking that clarification.
Thank you.
If
No.
I may, Mr Mayor.
Yes? you may.
I will be speaking. I will speak against it, and I better stick with my colleague, the old wise fox, Councillor Ben Buckley, when I have raised such concerns about it. I do respect the officers' deliverance of how the wordings come about, and I do respect, the policy as a whole. But with that stated, I did argue that I hoped that they might consider changing the word power to duty, because I felt some of the wording could be misinterpreted in the wrong manner once it is actually out in the workforce. So unless there was a condition or a limitation in the far right-hand column 4, I felt that that should be giving them a direction, or the delegates a direction of where the actual the actual procedure lies. So one of the interesting things that I did find about this particular policy, of this particular, what is it, the delegation, was the fact that that actually included things about the crematorium and cemeteries, which hadn't previously been in any of our documentation beforehand. So it's probably something that I'd like to highlight, the fact that it has actually been, put into this document, which it hadn't been there before. So Cemeteries and Crematorium Act 2003 is something that is now within this document. So with that stated, I'll leave it at that, but I just wanted the community to know that I was in there having a good fight for them all in regards to the complications of this document. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peltz. So if there's no further discussion, we'll put this to the vote, councillors. So all those in favour? Those against? Thank you. The recommendation is passed, but Councillor Buckley and Councillor Peltz have voted against. Thank you, councillors. Now that goes, we move to 5.2.4, which is actually something for the next council, but it's a council meeting date post-election declaration. So another one for Councillor, for Mr. Canizzaro to speak to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors. Before you is a report seeking to amend the council meeting schedule over the next couple of months. We have presented this to you tonight because of some uncertainty around the potential declaration of the elected members. We are expecting that the declaration will occur on Friday the 13th of November, but we are aware that there may well be some issues with potentially Australia Post and the postal voting system. And therefore, it's been flagged that we are preparing to have a plan B and a plan C. Hence, we'd like to propose an amendment to the council meeting schedule as presented in the recommendation. So the recommendation is seeking to schedule potentially the 17th of November 2020 as the statutory council meeting if the declaration happens on the 13th. If it happens after the 13th of November, we're proposing that it be rescheduled to the 24th of November. And that in and of itself has a knock-on effect of potentially a week for every other council meeting. We're also proposing to schedule an 8th of December 2020, or the 8th of December 2020 meeting be amended to the 15th of December 2020. We're also proposing to, for the 24th of November 2020 meeting to be amended to the 1st of December 2020 meeting. Hence, you understand the potential knock-on effects. So we're planning ahead and we're bringing it to council tonight for a resolution so that we potentially have planned for all risks that we can consider at the moment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Good, thank you. Councillor Roberts raised his hand, which I did expect because I was thinking probably his question might be that these dates don't suit him.
I was going to say I'm happy to move it, Mr. Mayor. Fair play.
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
So it's not a question, no questions involved? Okay. So, all right, so it's moved by Councillor Roberts and seconded by Councillor Ellis. So would you wish to say a couple of words about the dates, please?
Very briefly, just the dates suit me and I'm happy with that. But no, it's just smart decision making given the current circumstances and logistical challenges we might encounter. So happy to support it. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Ellis.
Very briefly, happy to support it because understanding, having brought, I'll better start again. being aware of the challenges before the Victorian Electoral Commission in processing this particular election post the closure of the election. There needs to be flexibility in the meeting dates for the new council. So I support the format that's been provided to council as being practical and sensible, and it still may need to be changed at a later time after this meeting. So it's a matter for us, I recommend, to adopt as a practical solution to the challenges ahead in the processing of this current election.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak for or against? All right, councillors. Well, so we have a mover and a seconder. So all those in favour of these election dates? And thank you. That is unanimous. So item 6, I've been told, well, it's urgent and other business, Mr CEO.
That is correct, Mr Mayor. I believe Councillor Buckley has a matter he wishes to raise.
Yeah, thank
Councillor
you.
Buckley, yes.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I, Councillor Ben Buckley, wish to raise an item of other business relating to the presentation to the Mayor, Councillor John White.
Mr Mayor, I'm happy to second that application for it to be considered introduction of a discussion in relation to Mayor White.
Yeah, there's a place I've never been before, so I'd actually perhaps ask Mr Canizzaro, what's the next procedure?
Seconder. We need a seconder.
Mr Mayor, to ask Councillor whether they'll admit Councillor Buckley's request to discuss your good self.
That's
No,
correct.
we
You have a
actually
mover
did
and a
have
seconder.
a mover and a seconder. So,
Then we vote on it, yeah.
so will I go with vote for or against first? Good, yes. You've caught me sort of off guard. So, yeah, those in favour of Councillor Buckley's introducing. So I suppose I should vote yes. So that's unanimous. Thank you, Councillor Buckley.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll come up there to see you. I don't actually see what it is.
Well, I've actually been watching you all night because in the new seating arrangements, you've been right in my face, and I reckon you've been watching me like a hawk.
Sometimes I have to. Now, that component. Yeah, all right. I would like to make a presentation to Councillor John White on behalf of the Councillors, Chief Executive Officer and staff of the East Gippsland Shire Council in appreciation of his diligence and dedication during the past 12 months as Mayor. So thank you for that, John. And also, on top of that, you've had one hell of a year, you know. It's been, if it hasn't been one thing, it's been another, and I don't know how you managed that. I was lucky to be in a place where we couldn't move much anyway, couldn't do much, because they wouldn't let us out. If I'd have got out, they wouldn't let me in. So, anyway, thank you very much for that, and your good lady, Lynette.
Leanne.
Oh, Leanne, that was
I didn't. No one should have. I was going to say you shouldn't have said that. Now she knows.
the other one.
Now she knows.
Okay. Well, what do we do? Where's the flower?
Mr Mayor.
Flowers.
Hang on. Mr Mayor, sorry. Mr Mayor.
Oh, that's we vote on the motion.
Yeah, Mr Mayor, you need a mover and a seconder.
That's the motion. So,
If I can help, I'd like to second Councillor Buckley's motion.
Thank you.
Thanks, Colin.
Thank you, Councillor
That
Ellis.
he's just put forward to council.
yeah. All right. You can help you with this job too as well.
I can. Well, Mr Mayor,
So-
I know it's unusual circumstances.
Do
Mr
we
Mayor, I
vote?
know
We
it's
need to
unusual
vote?
circumstances, but you still need to get a vote.
A vote?
And then just to confirm that, and then we can proceed. All those in favour?
All those in favour? I feel I should abstain. I've only done it, that's the first time.
You're still going to get the present, mate.
Okay, so it was... All right, so that was passed 8-1.
Here we go. Put them up here, I suppose. This would be the spot. There we go. Put that there. Yeah. Oh,
A hat.
is it big enough?
Nice. Do I get a right of reply? Yeah, well, thank you so much for that acknowledgement, Councillor Buckley. It's been a pleasure having you as Deputy Mayor, although you were only asked, I think, on one occasion to fill in for me, and that ended in disaster. We won't go into detail of what it was about, but it's something you could put in your book. It's a story for your book. So, oh yes, he did in Can River. Sorry about that. Yes, he actually ran the meeting. So, same day. You can only count it once. Yeah, look, I would actually say, in listening to the kind words you said, you probably just brushed over the year. It's actually been one hell of a year. Not just for myself, but for everybody here in East Gippsland, whether they be councillors, staff at council, or people from DELP, or the CFA, or the farmers, or the people in the small communities that were decimated by the fire. So it has been one hell of a year. And yeah, we got one little glimmer of sunshine when that wonderful campaign of the Empty Esky, which just brought people rushing back to our region for the whole of 2.5 weeks before we were put into lockdown with COVID. Now, we're still in lockdown with COVID. I mean, look at this, we're unrecognisable because we're wearing masks still. Keep our fingers crossed that this pandemic can be brought completely under control for the sake of our communities. So it's been one of those years, and I guess we're still here. We've got to give thanks for that we are still here. And our community is recovering. Many people are probably busier than they've ever been as a result of what's happened to us. I just, as I said earlier, I tip my hat to all those people who have supported this region in such a terrible time. And I don't know what else to say other than, I have tried to be as strong as possible, but it has also at times knocked my socks off, some of the things and some of the stories. I could perhaps end the meeting by just to say I'm wearing my son's tie for the last meeting. And miss him terribly. So thank you, everybody. So could we close the meeting at 7:24? Thank you.